The printing press, 1450s to revolution of knowledge and literacy. The invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in the mid-15th century ranks as one of the most significant technological innovations in human history. More than a tool for printing books, the printing press democratized access to knowledge, ideas, and education, fostering an era of profound change across the social, religious, scientific, and political landscapes of Europe and beyond. Before the printing press, knowledge was confined to the elite, those who had access to rare and expensive hand-copied manuscripts. The sudden ability to reproduce written materials on a mass scale changed this forever, paving the way for the Renaissance, the Reformation, the Enlightenment, and the scientific revolution. At the core of this transformation was the fact that knowledge could now be disseminated cheaply, quickly, and widely, empowering individuals to engage with ideas in ways previously unimaginable. For the first time in history, books were available to ordinary people, not just the aristocracy, clergy, and scholars. This shift brought about a rise in literacy, the spread of critical thinking, and a restructuring of power as the monopoly on knowledge held by the few began to crumble. The printing press did not just change how information was shared. It sparked a cultural revolution that ultimately transformed societies and altered the trajectory of human history. In this chapter, we will explore the transformative effects of Gutenberg's invention, from its technical innovations and immediate impact on European society to its profound long-term implications for global knowledge dissemination, education, and the empowerment of the individual. Before the printing press, a world of exclusive knowledge. Before Gutenberg's printing press, books and written materials were a luxury few could afford. Books were laboriously hand-copied by scribes, often in monasteries, and could take months or even years to complete. Depending on the complexity of the text and the intricacies of any accompanying illustrations or decoration, this made books prohibitively expensive, sometimes costing as much as a small house, and ensured that only the wealthy or influential institutions, like the church or royalty, had access to them. The scarcity of books naturally limited literacy rates among the general population. In medieval Europe, the vast majority of people were illiterate, and those who could read often had access only to religious texts like the Bible or prayer books. The spread of knowledge was tightly controlled by the church and the aristocracy, who could use their monopoly on information to maintain their political and religious authority. Manuscripts were often written in Latin, a language known primarily by scholars, clergy, and the elite, further restricting the accessibility of information to the common person. The church was the central authority in intellectual and spiritual life, and its control over knowledge and education was nearly absolute. Moreover, the process of copying manuscripts by hand was fraught with errors. As scribes made copies of copies, mistakes crept in, altering the original texts over time. This meant that even when books were reproduced, the accuracy of the information was often compromised, leading to a fractured and inconsistent body of knowledge. Intellectual progress was slow, and any advances in science, philosophy, or theology were confined to a small group of learned men who were often isolated from broader society. The invention of the printing press. The invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in Mainz, Germany in the 1450s changed everything. Gutenberg's key innovation was not just the press itself but the development of movable type. Earlier attempts at printing, such as block printing, which had been used in China as early as the 9th century, involved carving entire pages of text into wooden blocks, which could then be inked and pressed onto paper. However, this method was labor-intensive and costly, especially for long texts, since each block could be used for only one page. Gutenberg's movable type system, by contrast, allowed individual letters and characters to be cast in metal and rearranged to form any combination of words. These reusable pieces could be moved, reset, and printed over and over again, making the production of books far more efficient and cost-efficient. Gutenberg combined this innovation with a modified wine press, which he adapted to create a printing machine capable of producing many copies of a single text with relative speed and consistency. The result was a revolution in book production. Where once it had taken a scribe months to hand copy a single book, Gutenberg's press could produce hundreds of identical copies in a fraction of the time. His first major project was the production of the Gutenberg Bible, a 42-line Bible that remains one of the most famous printed works in history. Gutenberg printed about 180 copies of his Bible, roughly 50 of which still survive today. The clarity, precision, and aesthetic quality of the Gutenberg Bible were unlike anything seen before, and it set a new standard for book production across Europe. The real innovation, however, lay not just in the Bible itself, but in the implications of this new printing technology. Suddenly, the barriers to producing books and other printed materials were dramatically lowered. This sparked a cascade of developments that would reshape European society and, eventually, the entire world. The democratization of knowledge. One of the most immediate and significant effects of the printing press was the democratization of knowledge. The ability to mass-produce books meant that they could be sold more cheaply, putting them within the reach of the growing middle class. As books became more affordable and accessible, literacy rates began to rise. The printing press made it possible for a far greater number of people to learn to read, which, in turn, allowed them to participate more fully in the intellectual and cultural life of their societies. By making books available in vernacular languages, the languages spoken by ordinary people rather than Latin, printers helped to break the Church's monopoly on education and knowledge. For the first time, people could read religious texts, legal codes, scientific treatises, and literature in their own language. This opened up avenues of self-education that had previously been available only to scholars and clergy. People no longer had to rely solely on oral traditions or the teachings of the Church. They could read and interpret information for themselves. This shift was particularly important in the context of religion. The ability to print Bibles and religious texts in vernacular languages allowed ordinary people to engage directly with their faith in ways that had previously been mediated by priests and the church hierarchy. The Bible, previously accessible only to the clergy and elite, was now within reach of the masses. This had profound consequences for religious practice and belief, as individuals began to question established doctrines and seek personal interpretations of Scripture. The stage was set for the Protestant Reformation, a movement that would forever alter the religious landscape of Europe. The printing press and the Protestant Reformation. The Protestant Reformation of the early 16th century is perhaps the most famous example of how the printing press transformed society by democratizing access to knowledge. Central to the Reformation was Martin Luther, a German monk and theologian who famously nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the castle church in Wittenberg in 1517, challenging the Catholic Church's practice of selling indulgences and calling for reforms. However, it was not Luther's bold act alone that sparked the widespread religious upheaval. It was the printing press that allowed his ideas to spread rapidly across Europe. After all, before the Reformation, within weeks of posting the 95 Theses, Luther's words were printed and distributed widely, reaching audiences far beyond Wittenberg. By the end of the year, his ideas had spread across Germany, and soon after they had made their way to France, England, and beyond. The printing press made it possible for Luther's criticisms of the Catholic Church to be shared, debated, and discussed by an audience that had previously been excluded from such theological debates. The rapid spread of Luther's writings ignited a religious revolution. The Reformation called into question not only the authority of the Catholic Church, but also the very structure of Christian belief and practice. People who had never before had access to the Bible now could read it for themselves and form their own interpretations, independent of the Church's teachings. This led to the establishment of Protestantism, with new branches of Christianity emerging across Europe, each advocating for different interpretations of scripture and religious practice. The Reformation also had profound political implications. As the Catholic Church's authority waned, new political alliances and conflicts emerged between Protestant and Catholic states. Kings and princes, who aligned themselves with Protestantism, gained new autonomy from the Pope, while religious conflicts like the 30 Years' War reshaped the geopolitical landscape of Europe. Without the printing press, it is unlikely that the Reformation would have had such a widespread or lasting impact. The ability to rapidly reproduce and distribute printed texts gave Luther and other reformers the means to spread their ideas to a vast audience, igniting a religious and political movement that forever changed Europe. The spread of scientific knowledge. The printing press also played a critical role in the scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries, a period during which scholars began to challenge long-held beliefs about the natural world and develop new theories based on observation, experimentation, and mathematical reasoning. Prior to the printing press, scientific knowledge was fragmented and often confined to the manuscripts of a few scholars, many of whom worked in isolation from one another. The spread of ideas was slow and subject to distortion as copies of manuscripts were passed down through the generations. With the advent of the printing press, scientific knowledge could be disseminated quickly and accurately. Scholars across Europe could now access each other's work, leading to a greater exchange of ideas and more rapid advancements in understanding. The standardization of texts also ensured that discoveries and theories could be recorded and shared consistently, reducing errors and misinterpretations that had been common in hand-copied manuscripts. One of the most famous examples of how the printing press facilitated the spread of scientific knowledge is the work of Nicolaus Copernicus, a Polish astronomer who in 1543 published a Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres. In this groundbreaking work, Copernicus proposed a heliocentric model of the solar system, challenging the long-accepted view that the Earth was the center of the universe. Copernicus's ideas were controversial and challenged centuries of Aristotelian and Ptolemaic cosmology, which placed the Earth at the center of the cosmos. Thanks to the printing press, Copernicus's work was widely circulated, sparking debates among scholars and clergy. Although his ideas were initially met with resistance, they laid the foundation for future astronomers like Galileo Galilei and Johannes Kepler, who would further develop the heliocentric model and revolutionize our understanding of the universe. The printing press also made possible the widespread dissemination of works by Isaac Newton, whose Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy, published in 1687, laid the groundwork for modern physics. Newton's laws of motion and universal gravitation transformed the study of mechanics, and his work became a cornerstone of the Enlightenment, influencing generations of scientists, philosophers, and thinking. Without the printing press, the scientific revolution would have been a far slower process. The ability to share discoveries and theories rapidly and accurately allowed scientists to build on each other's work, accelerating the pace of innovation and leading to breakthroughs that have shaped the modern world. The Enlightenment, knowledge as power. The printing press was also instrumental in the rise of the Enlightenment, an intellectual and philosophical movement that emphasized reason, science, and the rights of the individual. The Enlightenment, which reached its peak in the 18th century, was driven in large part by the widespread availability of printed books, pamphlets, and journals. Thinkers like Voltaire, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau were able to share their ideas about liberty, equality, and human rights with a broad audience, challenging the traditional power structures of monarchy, aristocracy, and the church. Locke's ideas about natural rights, life, liberty, and property were particularly influential, inspiring the American Revolution and the drafting of the United States Constitution. Likewise, Rousseau's writings on the social contract and the importance of participatory government had a profound impact on the French Revolution and the development of modern democratic states. The printing press made the Enlightenment possible by democratizing access to knowledge. The ability to read and engage with new ideas about politics, science, and society empowered individuals to think critically and question authority. Literacy rates continued to rise, and the growing middle class became increasingly involved in intellectual and political debates. The spread of Enlightenment ideas led to calls for political reform, the abolition of slavery, and the expansion of civil liberties, setting the stage for the modern world. On the other hand, it also has helped people to make sense of their ability to think. The growth of literacy and education. The printing press also had a profound impact on literacy and education. As books became more affordable and accessible, more people learned to read, and the demand for education grew. In the centuries following the invention of the press, schools and universities expanded, and new institutions of learning were founded across Europe and the Americas. Books and printed materials became essential tools for education, allowing students to engage directly with texts rather than relying solely on lectures or oral traditions. The availability of textbooks and reference materials facilitated more systematic and rigorous education, particularly in fields like law, medicine, and the sciences. The expansion of literacy also led to the development of public libraries, where people from all walks of life could access books and learn about a wide range of subjects. The rise of literacy and education had a profound effect on society, enabling people to participate more fully in civic life and making knowledge a public good rather than a private luxury. The spread of reading and writing skills created new opportunities for economic mobility, as literacy became a valuable asset in the growing bureaucratic and commercial sectors of early modern Europe. Global impact and legacy. Although the printing press was invented in Europe, its impact soon spread across the globe. In the centuries that followed Gutenberg's invention, printing technologies were introduced to the Ottoman Empire, China, Japan, and the Americas, transforming societies far beyond Europe. In China, for example, the introduction of movable type printing in the 16th century allowed for the rapid dissemination of Confucian texts and the expansion of scholarly activity. In the Americas, printing presses were established in Mexico City, Lima, and Boston in the early colonial period, facilitating the spread of religious, political, and scientific ideas among the European settlers and indigenous populations. The ability to print and distribute texts played a crucial role in the American Revolution, as pamphlets like Thomas Paine's Common Sense rallied support for independence from Britain. The global impact of the printing press cannot be overstated. It fundamentally altered the way knowledge was produced, distributed, and consumed, creating a more connected and informed world. The press paved the way for the rise of modern journalism, publishing, and mass media, and it continues to shape our understanding of information and communication in the digital age. Published everyone. The invention of the printing press in the 1450s was a turning point in human history, revolutionizing the way knowledge was shared and accessed. By making books and printed materials affordable and widely available, Gutenberg's press democratized education, fostered the spread of new ideas, and paved the way for the religious, scientific, and political revolutions that followed. The printing press gave people the tools to think critically, challenge authority, and engage with the world in new ways. Its impact on literacy, education, and intellectual freedom continues to resonate today, as the principal